just gonna go over my engine. So start out with the block. It's a 98 plus Camry block. For those of you who don't know, that on the exhaust side, we got a square boss, we call it. That's where it's got like, you got the round plug, but around it's got like this clover leaf or square plugs. We found out through people that this block tends to be stronger. It's also heavier if you weigh it. It's like 4 pounds heavier than a 98 Camry that's got the round. And it's only found in America. And everyone we've seen seems to be a Kentucky car. So I got the square boss 5S 98 plus block. Had it decked. Clean. Then had it O-ringed, as you can see here. He cuts a groove about like 23 thousandths deep, puts in a 40 thousandths O-ring, stainless steel O-ring, puts it back in, and then decks it so it's only protruding 4 thousandths of an inch. And it's hard to see, but the O-ring's technically flat. See, because it got decked. He actually decked the O-ring. So that gives a little extra pinch on the head gasket, the seal. So then I have DP pistons, which through the years I've had like piston valve problems and modified the valve reliefs. I sent them an old CP piston that I had CP do for me. They put them in the same spot, so I know my valve reliefs are in the right spot, because I know like I had JE do it and I broke a valve because they were in the wrong spot. So, and I saw Wiseco and JE all do the same, and I don't like it. So every time I do it, I have them make it to my spec valve relief cuts. Then yeah, so it's DP pistons, and then I have a C350 material wrist pin that's like, I think it said 6mm wall wrist pin, and I have it DLC coated, so the wrist pin's even DLC coated. And then we'll get into that. So then I have the block half filled, which you can see there's the fill. And it's done on like an angle. Just put the water pump on, goes up, and the water can still fill in right there. So technically, like a half fill, like half of it is technically 100% half is the top of this hole. That's half your coolant reservoir in the block. So I mean, it's a little under half, but it's about what it is. Then on the block, we did, this is usually like, this is usually just a flat thing, like it'd be like this. So we drilled it and tapped it, and now I can put like an NPT to AN fitting, and I can run a breather to a catch can. I have a crankcase breather, and same with this one. This was normally just a hole for this, which are like brackets for turbo support. And I drilled and tapped this to NPT so I can run a breather. I'm gonna just plug this and run this, and I'm gonna run a crankcase pressure sensor. And if this starts getting high, then I'm gonna add a second breather through that. And I'm running a 5S crank, and I do not grind the crank down the 3S sizes. I'll show you that here in 1 second. Let me flip this over. I think that's about, oh yeah, it's a 87.25mm bore. That's what I run. The reason I have a 5S block and I go to find a decent one, I only go 87.25, because then I can go 87.5, 87.75, and if I have problems and blow stuff up, I get more uses out of it. That's why I just don't go right up to 87.5. So, to each their own. Some people like just going bigger. I don't care about displacement. I just care about getting the most uses out of one block. So then I run a 5S crank, but it's a non-balance shaft versus like the balance shaft style like this. This is out of a Celica or MR2. And some of them still have the balance shaft styles. There's no balance shaft on it. This is an actual like non-balance shaft one. Then I have the DP rods, which you can see staple there on the rod bolts. Then my rods are 4mm longer than stock. Stock is 138. Mine are 142 plus the stroke. So then my wrist pin is moved way up on the piston into the oil groove, and I'm running buttons to support the oil ring. but that gives me a better rod ratio, especially with the added stroke, which would decrease the rod ratio. So it brings it back up to a decent amount so I can run 9,500 RPM. I got DP main bolts, which are like the strength of L19 for ARP, roughly. And so of course, when you get main studs that are aftermarket put in, you need a line hone. So this has been line honed with those studs. And then I'm running ACL race bearings in the main, ACL thrust bearing, and then my rods. In order to run the 5S crank without grinding the rods down, what we did is this rod is actually custom. Obviously it's custom length because it's longer by 4 millimeters, but it's also fit to hold a 2JZ rod bearing, because the 2JZ rod bearing journal is the same diameter as a 5S, just the 5S rod is a wider width. So this is like a custom rod, so it's wider than a 2JZ rod just a little bit, so it fits in the crank to have the proper thrust, but it holds a 2JZ rod bearing, so I don't have to grind the crank. It's just get a 5S crank, polish it, custom rods made. Because I mean, if you get nice rods that are $1,000 and you get custom rods that are basically $100 more, I mean, grinding the crank's the same. So I just like having custom rods, and that way if something goes wrong, I just get bearings and a crank. I don't have to grind another crank, and I can reuse my rods or whatnot. That's just how I've always done it. So, but that sums up the block. And also I had on the crank, 5S usually has smaller rod bolt holes. I didn't make it the 3S bolt hole pattern. I just made it the 3S size in the 5S pattern. This might confuse people, but so I still need to run, like I have a Clutch Masters disc, and they usually have oblong holes that fit 5S and 3S. But the 3S or the 5S flywheel bolts have a collar on it that are the same size as the 3S bolt. So by just drilling it bigger in the same 5S pattern, it still fits. And I can run 3S bolts, because my last time my flywheel came loose and I didn't like that, so I upgraded that to drilling the holes bigger, so I'm just going to put red Loctite in